Those of you that have joined the dark side and become a vampire are probably familiar with Falion. Residing in Morthal, Falion is well known as the town weirdo, as he makes it known that he has a strange obsession with the undead, specifically vampires. Because of this, the town's residents have quite a low opinion of Falion and spread various rumors about him, like that he eats deer hearts and he has something sinister planned for the citizens of Morthal. But most of these rumors can be shrugged off as just that. Rumors, right? After all, he did cure our vampirism that one time and is a pretty nice guy for Skyrim standards. I mean, at least he isn't trying to kill us like most of the game's NPCs. However, Morthal's residents may actually be correct about Falion, as during the early hours of the morning, Falion can be seen wandering the marsh surrounding the town for no justified reason. What's even stranger is that he eventually stops at a summoning shrine. Players who had their vampirism cured by Falion will be familiar with this location, as this is the same shrine where Falion calls upon the Daedric Lord Molag Bal to have your vampirism cured. But he doesn't seem to be speaking to anyone this time, or doing anything for that matter. He's just standing there, menacingly. It gets even stranger if you catch him in the act, where he begs you not to tell anyone of the matter, even accepting to pay a bribe to keep your mouth shut. You may choose to uphold your promise and never speak of the matter again, or you can go to the Jarl of Morthal right after. Doing so will have Falion summoned to the Jarl and be threatened with dire consequences should he continue wandering into the marsh. But the question remains as to what he was doing at the summoning shrine. Although there are no official explanations given to us, many fans have created theories of their own. Some people justify Falion's wandering as him continuing his work in protecting Morthal from the looming vampire threat, but others believe that something more sinister is going on. Skyrim is all about being immersed in a second life that lets you do things you cannot do in real life, like cast spells, slay dragons, and talk to women. One of the cornerstones for many people's playthroughs is to have a lovable pet by their side, but if you don't take a liking to the more furry companions in Skyrim, then you'll be out of luck in finding a suitable virtual pet for your virtual home. Although the Hearthfire expansion is known for giving players the chance to build their own homestead, being able to adopt children provides a lot more entertaining scenarios. One of the more standout examples of this is how your adopted son can bring home a live mud crab. And before you can even be proud that your boy is learning to fend for himself, you learn that he wants to keep the thing as a pet rather than as food. If you decide to keep the mud crab, then it'll become your son's new pet, and you can either find it relaxing in your son's bedroom or following him around the house. And as disappointed as you may be at your son, you can't deny that the mud crab has a pretty adorable face. Ever walk into solitude and think to yourself, man, that axe that just chopped off that guy's head looks pretty cool? If so, then you'll be happy to know that you can actually add this weapon to your collection. In the Castle Dower dungeon, you'll find Atar, the headman of Solitude, who's also the guy that killed Rogvir when you first enter the city. Completing the quest for him will let him become a follower. From there, owning the headsman's axe is as easy as taking it from Atar's inventory. You can also just kill Atar and take it off his corpse too, if you're not a fan of the Imperials. Although the headsman's axe doesn't have any enchantments, it's still quite unique in that it's the longest reaching weapon in the game, so you won't have to get up close and personal when wielding this battle axe. It also has around half the weight, which is typical of other battle axes, and although the lack of enchantments is a letdown, it also means you can enchant it yourself with whatever you like, potentially turning this into one of the most powerful weapons in the game. Maven Blackbriar has a presence like no other character in the game. Her power and influence is felt with every encounter you have with the woman, but a friend she is not. In fact, she's tried to kill you. One of the random encounters in the game is having a Dark Brotherhood assassin try to kill you with a note that says somebody wants you dead and that they have already paid the gold for it. Well, if you go to the basement of the Blackbriar Meadery, you'll find a locked door. Opening it and going inside will reveal all the equipment required to perform the Black Sacraments, and a note written by Maven that expresses her frustration with the Dark Brotherhood for not being able to kill her target. Although it's unknown why she would like you dead, it could very well be the reason your character was trying to cross the border in the first place. While exploring Skyrim, you've most likely come across some unfortunate bugs that have happened to get trapped in jars. Weirdly enough, these bugs serve no purpose, and their value is quite poor, only selling for around 1 gold. If that wasn't strange enough, then there are also strange inscriptions that can be seen on the bottom of the lid, which have no apparent meaning. You can't even ask anybody in the world about them, nor does anyone seem to even mention their existence in-game. There are 8 insect jars in total, 3 of them being common items that you can find throughout Skyrim, and the other 5 being unique to specific locations. Although many people have created a plethora of ideas about these insects in jars that left people with more questions than answers. Like, for example, a fan who used real-life runic text to translate the symbols on the jars concluded that they are somehow related to an elaborate Easter egg that requires the player to do a series of obscure tasks to win some sort of prize. Unfortunately for these dedicated theorists, the conspiracy regarding these insects would be laid to rest in 2017, when fellow YouTuber Camelworks inquired about the matter to Skyrim developers. The bugs, unsurprisingly, turned out to simply be the remains of cut content. What sort of cut content, you may ask? Well, that remains unanswered. But if you ask me, it was most likely a collectible quest of some sort, where you would have to find these bugs in a jar and then turn them all in for a reward, much like the godforsaken No Stone Unturned quest, where you must collect all 24 unusual gems. Udafract is a character that has been found throughout the Elder Scrolls games. This story creature was first seen hiding inside a cave in Morrowind's Blood Moon expansion. Then, in Oblivion, you get the chance to kill Udafract's mother. And now this monster's back in Skyrim with a vengeance. Luckily, finding him isn't too hard, as he's made a home underneath the Dawnstar Sanctuary. You'll likely come across him during the end of the Dark Brotherhood questline. It's too bad that this unique troll is going to meet the same fate as his family. Despite his unique look, Udafract is barely a challenge and can be put to rest pretty easily. Still, this troll is a pretty cool piece of Elder Scrolls history. The Elder Scrolls games have been no stranger to insane characters. In Skyrim alone, we had Cicero, Moiri, and Heimskar, but all of these people are model citizens in comparison to Arundel. The description of him speaks for itself, as the wiki describes him as a high elf conjurer, necromancer, and necrophile. That's right, Arundel has a thing for dead women. This grade A sicko can be found in Ingvild after he was exiled from Dawnstar for being too much of a creep. And instead of seeing this as a wake-up call, Arundel decided to go deeper into his perversions and turn mummified Nord women in Ingvild to his subjects. Arundel eventually lost all attraction to live women and chose to remain in the Nordic ruin until you show up and put this sicko to rest. Just make sure you don't die if you're playing as a female. I know that we've seen some strange anomalies in the previous entries, but this entry takes the prize for weirdness. DLC to Reichling Furniture is a test cell that contains a group of Reichlings that are all playing out unique animations. One of them is hitting a chisel with a hammer, another is dancing, and there's even one that's sitting atop a large throne. Well, large for a Reichling anyway. Aside from these goblins, there are 2 naked Nords. One of them is simply holding a large boulder and walks around with it, while the other falls from the ceiling to his death. Strange, I know. It's unknown what the purpose of this test cell is, but we can assume that it was made to test out various unique Reichling animations, as well as an animation for humanoid characters carrying boulders. However, I really don't have an explanation for the gentleman falling from the ceiling. I guess that's Bethesda's idea of an inside joke or something. Ysolda was the first candidate for marriage to most players, and who can't blame them? She's smart, beautiful, and ambitious. If you speak to her, she'll talk about her dream to buy the bannered mare from Hulda, and you can help fulfill this dream. If Hulda somehow manages to die, then Ysolda will take her place as the innkeeper. This may sound like a happy ending for Ysolda, but going to Sleeping Tree Cave will reveal her darker side. Inside the cave, you'll find a dead orc named Ulag with a note written by Ysolda. The note goes into detail about her dealings with skooma and sleeping tree sap, revealing that behind her seemingly innocent persona, Ysolda is a drug dealer. If you return to her with the note, then instead of wasting her breath mourning her business partner, she immediately offers you Ulag's position, allowing you to sell her sleeping tree sap at 150 gold a pop. The Windshear has been constantly regarded as the best sword you can have for legendary difficulty, and that's thanks to its downright overpowered enchantment. But obtaining the sword is no easy task, and many of you will have to make a new save file to find it. This is because Windshear can only be obtained during the quest Hail Sithis. While on the Emperor's ship, go to the bowsprit of the vessel, and you'll find the Windshear at the very top. And it makes sense why Bethesda made the window to wield this weapon so small. as the sword can make the game so easy it stops being fun. This is thanks to its enchantment, which has a very high chance of staggering enemies when they're struck with the sword, making enemies unable to move or attack you. Many players simply keep this weapon in their offhand and use a stronger weapon in the main hand, and watch as the infamous legendary difficulty turns into child's play. Another weapon that many people miss the chance to collect is Bolar's Oathblade, an Akaviri sword that, much like Windshear, has a very small window to obtain. But unlike Windshear, this sword is far less popular in the Skyrim community, making it a far rarer item to have. To find it, you'll have to go to Bloated Man's Grotto, but only before you begin the quest Ill Met by Moonlight. Otherwise, the layout of the grotto will be altered and block you from reaching the sword. The only hope of acquiring the sword then is by killing Sinding during the quest and waiting an in-game month for the cell to reset to its original layout. The blade itself does 25 points of stamina damage and inflicts 12 points of fear for 30 seconds. These enchantments are nothing extraordinary, but the fact that so few players have obtained this weapon is a good enough reason to add it to your collection. It's also got a pretty cool backstory, as it once belonged to a blade warrior who was tracked down and killed by Thalmor agents. So, it'll be the perfect weapon the next time you want to hunt down some Thalmor bootlickers. Jarl Balgruuf is one of the most likable characters in Skyrim. Being the first Jarl that most players meet in the game, Jarl Balgruuf is shown to be a man of integrity and justness. But what if I told you that Balgruuf's warm and kind-hearted personality was nothing but a front for his true self? During the quest, The Whispering Door, you learn that Jarl Balgruuf's youngest son, Nelkir, is possessed by Mephala, the Daedric Prince of Murder, Lies, and Deception. At the beginning of the questline, after calling his father a disgusting pig, Nelkir says that he knows he has a different mother than all his siblings. So, if we're going to assume what Nelkir says is true, then what we're left with is one main question. Who is Nelkir's mother? Well, there's a lot of speculation about this one. Some fans have pointed out that in Skyrim's creation kit, Nelkir is listed as Balgruuf's brother rather than his son, which would mean that Nelkir and Balgruuf share the same mother. But it's more likely that Nelkir was listed as Balgruuf's brother due to a limitation in the creation kit, where each family could only be assigned 2 children at the most, which is probably why Nelkir is listed as his brother. But the most reputable theory thus far is that Balgruuf murdered his wife. Hear me out. Considering that all this information is given out during the Whispering Door quest, where the Daedric Prince of Lies, Deceit and Murder offers you the Ebony Blaze, a weapon which is strengthened by the blood of deceit, it's very possible that Balgruuf killed his wife after she had learned of his affair and then hid the blade away, never to be seen again. This theory would also explain why Balgruuf is afraid of being chased out of Whiterun and why we never see Balgruuf's wife in the game. Even though many of these entries are pretty obscure, I'm pretty sure you've already heard the story of the Windhelm Pit. This location is one of the most fleshed out pieces of cut content in the game, with a fully designed cell with unique models and NPCs. Much like what we saw with Oblivion, fans speculated that the Windhelm Pit was likely going to be a gladiatorial arena, where the Dragonborn would have to fight enemies that would gradually become more difficult until they become the champion of the arena. However, some cut dialogue suggests that the arena would have also been a unique way of serving your time in Windhelm's jail, where you would have to fight to the death with another inmate. With that knowledge, it does make sense why Bethesda decided to cut this location from the game. After all, it probably isn't the smartest decision to free a prisoner because he killed someone else in cold blood. Luckily, modders came to the rescue and finished this part of the game for Bethesda, a habit which is becoming all too common with their games. So, even if you're upset with Bethesda's decision, you can still enjoy this piece of cut content. Hunting deer in Skyrim is like trying to talk to girls. Whenever you try to hit it, they just run away from you. The entire ordeal can be summed up as you shooting an arrow at a deer, missing, and then chasing the thing across the map just to kill it. But what if I told you there was an easier way of going about this? Although the courage spell was intended to be used on companions first and foremost, nothing's stopping you from casting it on enemies and creatures too. Since the spell prevents the target from fleeing, it can be extremely useful on your next hunting trip, as the creatures will try to go toe-to-toe with your Dragonborn rather than sprinting to the other side of the map after a gust of wind hits them. Diplomatic immunity is easily the most well-developed quest in the game, thanks to the unprecedented amount of choices and details that are on offer. One of the lesser-known choices is how you can disguise yourself as a Thalmor agent and blend in, with the other Aldmeri being none the wiser. Not only will this let you freely roam around the embassy without having to rely on a competent stealth build or leaving the grounds looking like the Red Wedding, but it will also give you access to exclusive dialogue and events that you cannot come across any other way. But this option isn't available for everyone. You'll first need to find a disguise within the embassy, and you're certainly not going to get away with it if you're playing as an Argonian. You can only be a high elf for the disguise to work. But as long as you meet those requirements, nobody will ever notice you, and you can complete the quest flawlessly. While on the topic of diplomatic immunity, I feel it would be hard-pressed to not mention Gissa and how you can prevent him from ambushing you later in the game. Gissa is a Nord beggar and overall degenerate who sold his soul to the Thalmor to be an informant for the Aldmeri Dominion. During diplomatic immunity, Gissa can be overheard arguing with Rullindil about his worth to the Thalmor. Later on in the main questline, you'll find out that his worth is pretty valuable after all, as he leads a group of Justicars right into Esbern's doorstep. But if you're looking to power your way through the questline and not have any unnecessary bloodshed, then you can prevent the Thalmor from ever finding Esbern's location. All you have to do is kill Gissa when you find him in the embassy. As a result, the Thalmor won't have any information to go on, making it impossible for them to travel to the Ratway and find Esbern's location. The Redwater Den looks like any other forest cottage that fell into ruin amidst the Civil War. But that's exactly what the skooma dealers running this joint want you to believe. A trapdoor inside the home will take you to a skooma dealing and manufacturing den. And like a medieval Heisenberg, these dealers are creating a special type of skooma, aptly named Redwater skooma. And this special brew is sure to give your soldier's product a run for its money. But taking a swig of the red liquid will make you pass out and reveal the den was merely a front made by an ancient vampire lord named Veneris Vulpin. Vulpin first found this location during his search for a fabled source of power known as the Bloodspring of Linger's Feast. Vulpin's leads led him to the rift, where he found the liquid of the Bloodspring bubbling out of the basement of an old hermit's house. After disposing of him and rallying a few followers, Vulpin managed to tunnel his way to the Bloodspring. But unfortunately, the spring was not all it was cracked up to be. It was pretty useless to vampires. Adamant on not making his journey a waste of time, Vulpin realized that the spring was extremely addictive to mortals. So, the mad lad built an entire den, mixed the Bloodspring with skooma to make it even more addictive, and began luring in people looking for a good time to make them dependent on the spring and have himself an infinite source of food. Before Ayla won the hearts of every Skyrim player on the planet, she was busy holding a secret relationship with another one of the companions. While walking around Jorvaska, you can overhear Njada telling Ayla about the rumors she heard about what she and Skjor get up to on their little hunts. Additionally, we can listen in on Skjor and Ayla discussing upcoming hunts. Even the leader of the companions, Kodlak, asks about the matter. This means that the entire guild thinks that the only thing Skjor's hunting is that booty. Jokes aside, another interesting thing is that out of all the companions, Ayla is the only one who doesn't want to remove her lycanthropy. Many theorists believe that Ayla is reluctant to remove her lycanthropy so that she can be reunited with Skjor in Hircine's hunting grounds. Finding treasure in Skyrim can sometimes feel like finding a needle in a haystack, with the biggest piece of aid given to you being a vague scribble of the location. However, some players believe you can be led to all sorts of treasures and secrets with the help of a guide. Foxes. That's right, over the years some players have speculated that foxes always led to treasure, and for a long time nobody actually knew if this was true or just a hoax. But after many years of speculation, a Skyrim developer finally revealed the truth, and it turns out this theory is actually true. Let me explain. Foxes will always lead you to treasure because Skyrim is made of polygons, and since the fox's AI is programmed to flee from the player, it tries to get as many polygons away from the player in as little time as possible. So, the foxes typically do this by running to points of interest, groups of bandits, and even sometimes hidden treasure chests. This mystery was finally solved by Skyrim developer Joel Burgess, who revealed it all in a Twitter thread he made, going into the intricacies of navmesh and AI pathfinding. Joel explains that foxes have a very simple AI, where all they have to do is run away from the player as far away as possible whenever the player gets near the fox. However, the way the distance is measured in video games is not the same as in real life. Instead of using kilometers or miles, video games use a term called navmesh. Without turning this video into a game design course, Navmesh is basically a bunch of triangles linked together that aid AI, such as foxes for example, to tell them where they can and cannot go. So, when a fox is told to run away from the player, they're actually being told to run X amount of triangles away from the player. Outdoor grassland areas, which is where you will typically find foxes, have pretty basic topography and don't need a lot of these triangles, but places like bandit camps, ruins, and yes, even hidden treasures all need more of these triangles since their design is more complex. So, as Joel puts it, yes, Skyrim's foxes actually do lead you to treasure. Pretty cool, hey? The Keening is not only arguably the best dagger in Skyrim, but it also has a very rich lore and history that turns this dagger into one of the best we've ever seen in an Elder Scrolls game. The dagger can be found during the quest Arniel's Endeavor, where you and Arniel go on a, endeavor to uncover the mystery behind the disappearance of the Dwemer race. What this boils down to, however, is one of the most tedious quests in the game, as Arniel's Endeavor feels like 4 fetch quests combined into one. Nevertheless, the quest does have a satisfying ending, and you get to keep the Keening at the end of it. And when I say this dagger is one of the best in the game, I'm not kidding. It has a base damage of 8, putting it on the higher end of the dagger damage spectrum. But more importantly, it has an enchantment that absorbs 10 points of health, stamina, and magicka all at once. Not only does this cause the enemy to light up like a rainbow when struck, but it makes for a perfect weapon for battle mage builds, who can use the weapon as a way to drain the stamina and magicka of enemies. The lore behind this weapon is also pretty interesting. The weapon was created by the chief tonal architect of the Dwemer, Lord Kangranak, and created as a tool to access the heart of Lorcan, and was later used by the player character in Morrowind. There are a lot of creatures in Skyrim, but none are as annoying as the mud crab. These pesky little creatures come in all shapes and sizes, but I have to say, the Guardian mud crab is easily the mother of all mud crabs due to its massive size. To find this big boy, you're going to have to help out a Nord hunter named Froki, who's a devout worshipper of the goddess Kin. Want to accept his quest to hunt down the guardian spirits of Skyrim's various fauna, you'll eventually come to the point when you have to take on the guardian spirits of a mud crab. This spectre, as big as it may be, is laughably easy to kill. In fact, it's only a few health points more than a regular mud crab. But hey, at least it looks kinda cool. If a giant spectral mud crab was too intimidating for you, then I'm sure Old Salty will be much more to your size. Residing at Northshire Landing, this unique mud crab is equally small and equally weak as any other of its kind. But be warned, Old Salty has friends to back him up. Friends who are also quite pathetic. Nevertheless, Old Salty's uniqueness goes beyond his name. Looting his corpse will show that he's holding a boot, a tankard, and some gold. This has led many people to believe that Old Salty is a reference to the mud crab merchant from Morrowind. Yes, in Morrowind you could find a talking mud crab, which sounded drunk and fittingly sold alcoholic beverages to the player. Some say that Old Salty is the same mud crab that was selling us booze back in Morrowind. But unfortunately, Old Salty doesn't share that mud crab's friendliness, and will instead attack you on sight. We're all aware that Grella the Kind doesn't exactly live up to her name, but what many people don't know is that her reputation goes far beyond her harsh demeanor. Grella the Kind is downright sadistic. She verbally abuses all the children, telling them that no one would ever want to adopt them, and also gives out beatings. Although this may sound like a mere spanking, it's much, much worse. Going inside one of the rooms reveals what is essentially a torture chamber, complete with shackles and buckets. If that wasn't bad enough, poor Constance has to constantly go against her better nature to follow Grellad's orders. There are several lines of dialogue where Grellad orders Constance to verbally abuse, silence, and steal from the children. No wonder the city guards didn't care about her murder. Skyrim is a big game with a big map to boot, so I wouldn't hold it against you if you've spent a little more time than you'd like to admit searching for your quest marker on the map. This minor frustration can turn into a bloody nightmare when you end up having hundreds of landmarks on the map, making the quest marker damn near impossible to locate. But something which and I assume many other people weren't aware of, is that you can instantly see where your quest marker is on the map. Simply head to your journal and press the X or square button on consoles or the M button on PC. You should be instantly taken directly to the world map and see exactly where the quest marker lies. Now, the only mystery is how in the hell I never found out about this. I mean, it has a prompt for it and everything. Nevertheless, this is sure to save you valuable time in the future. Although the Dark Brotherhood questline technically begins with us accepting the contract to kill Grelid the Kind from Aventus Aretino, our first true interaction with this ancient assassin order is sometime later, once we've been kidnapped by Astrid and wake up in an abandoned shack outside of Solitude. I'm sure you all know what happens afterward. Astrid reveals to us that there are 3 other captives in the shack, and we are given the choice to kill whichever we believe to be guilty. We are allowed to question them and can even kill multiple captives. However, we are never told outright who is truly guilty and who is innocent. So, we have to decide between killing Foltheim the Fearless, Elia Quintus, or Vasha the Khajiit. Fans believe that the actual person with a contract on their heads is you. This theory sparked due to the random encounter where a Dark Brotherhood assassin tries to murder you. This encounter can happen any time before you start the Dark Brotherhood questline, which could mean that the Dragonborn has had a contract on them before the game even begins. I mean, we were trying to cross the border and escape Skyrim after all. Something very similar to this scenario also occurred in Oblivion. In the Shaitanal Sanctuary, there's a Bosmer assassin called Talandril, who explains that her initial encounter with Lucien Lachance, then listener of the Dark Brotherhood, was on the other side of his blade. But Lucien was later impressed by Talandril after she killed the person who set out the contract against her father. Therefore, the captives in the room are nothing more than a ruse for Astrid to not only see our willingness to kill, but also to trade our life for that of another. This is further validated by the fact that our choice in who we kill doesn't matter. All that matters is that we must kill someone. So, in conclusion, the Dragonborn is the real target, right? Well, no. See, many fans who placed all this conjecture in their theories forgot to try one simple trick to find the killer, the clairvoyance spell. That's right, this otherwise useless spell turns out to be pretty good at laying fan theories to rest. When used, the spell points to Vasha, meaning that she is the correct person to kill in the abandoned shack, as she is the only person with a bounty placed on them. Although there are many evil things you can do in Skyrim, nothing is quite as cruel as throwing weaponized spiders at enemies. Despite these 8-legged monstrosities typically being found on the pointy end of your sword, you can turn them into little companions who will terrify any enemy they come across. All you have to do is head to White Ridge Barrow in Solstheim and find the imbuing chamber inside. This unique crafting station will let you combine albino spider pod with gems to create an elementally charged spider. For example, combining a spider pod with a ruby will make a fire spider. If it's mixed with a sapphire, then it'll turn into a frost spider, and so on. What you have as a result is a hand grenade from hell that will blow your enemies to bits if they don't first die from a heart attack after seeing 6 flaming spiders charge at them. Making money in the early game can be a bit of a struggle, especially if you're spending all your hard-earned gold on trainers. But what if I told you that there was a way to get training completely for free? There are several companions that you can come across who also happen to train a specific skill, and although you have to pay for their service like all other trainers, you can simply trade back the gold you paid them for. This essentially lets you level up a skill tree and get XP free of charge. Sapphire is one of the most mysterious characters in all of Skyrim. She's a woman of few words and even less to those she does not trust. Yet there are still a few tidbits of information that we know about her. Within Skyrim's official game guide, we learn that she was previously with the Dark Brotherhood, however left to satisfy her lust for wealth, hence joining the Thieves Guild. Her backstory was developed even further with the Dragonborn expansion, which not only revealed that Delvin Mallory had a brother living in Solstheim, but that he was unknowingly the uncle of Sapphire. This also means that Delvin's brother Glover is Sapphire's father, and in the basement of Glover's house, you can find a note for Sapphire which reveals everything. Taking this note to her will make her forever grateful and reward you with a one-of-a-kind exquisite sapphire. Most secrets in the game are typically scripted events or Easter eggs that were meant to be found, but this one is no Easter egg, but rather a full-blown game mechanic that's been lost to time. If you're looking to cause a well-placed distraction or just cause a little bit of mischief, then you'll be surprised to hear that you can cause a massive brawl against citizens without the use of a frenzy potion. All you have to do is throw a valuable item or two onto the ground and wait as the chaos ensues and people begin to beat the ever-living shit out of each other. Lighthouses in Skyrim seem to be bad news. Wherever they are, trouble seems to follow. and the Redguard family that would call this place home would soon realize this. Upon arrival, things already looked grim with a dead horse laying outside and the aftermath of the Chaurus attack inside the lighthouse's entrance. Reading through the notes reveals the family began hearing scratching noises in the basement but shrugged it off as skeevers. Unfortunately for them, the pests were a little stronger and more poisonous than they were expecting. One night, Habs, the father of the family, found his wife Ramanti dead and a Chaurus snacking on her corpse. And so, he killed the creature and went down to the basement to find the rest of his family. Unfortunately for him, Hab soon found himself in a Chaurus hive and was swiftly taken away. If you choose to follow in his footsteps, you'll be greeted by a Falmer hideout underneath the lighthouse with the remains of the siblings, Habi and Sudi, found inside. As for the father, you find his remains at the end of the dungeon in the belly of the Chaurus Reaper, which is likely the mother of all the Chaurus we came across. Once the family's avenged, you can take Hab's remains to the top of the lighthouse and relight the fire, which will give your healing spells a permanent buff. At least I get to have a happy ending. Too bad I can't say the same for the family. As far as survival mode goes, there aren't really any better shouts to have in your vocal arsenal than Become Ethereal. Thanks to its negation of damage and stamina, the shout is excellent for descending mountains and running long distances. But when it comes to combat, it's virtually useless. Or is it? In reality, Become Ethereal has a little exploit that went under Bethesda's nose. The Blood Skull Blade is easily the most unique weapon in Skyrim thanks to its ability. The energy blades it can shoot out are neither seen as magical nor physical damage, thus making the Become Ethereal shout go tits up when you use it. Attacking exclusively with the blade's energy streaks will allow you to remain ethereal while continuing to dish out damage. Is it useful? Not really. The attacks do little damage and Become Ethereal only lasts a short time. Still, it's pretty fun to stick it to Bethesda and corrupt the core idea of the shout. Alongside introducing house building and land ownership, the Hearthfire expansion for Skyrim also gave players the ability to adopt certain children in the game. And although there is a wide variety of kids with different personalities and upbringings, you can't adopt every child, at least not by default. Some children still have loving homes with parents that can take care of them, giving them no reason to be adopted. However, if something were to go wrong, and a child's parents had an accident, then the kid in question would be sent to Honor Hall Orphanage and be put up for adoption, allowing you to bring them into your homes. That's right, you can adopt children that you made into orphans, turning what was once an act of kindness and love into one of the darkest and most twisted choices that a player can make in the game. Talk about a messed up family. If you thought the previous entry was a little too elaborate of a way to deal with kids that you don't like, then you'll be happy to hear that Bethesda lets you be rewarded for beating up some unfortunate children. Within the small farming community of Rorikstead, players can find a character known as Lemkil. This Nord farmer is very cantankerous, particularly towards his two daughters, Sissel and Brit. This is because he blames the death of their mother on them and is angry to see that her death was, in Lemkil's eyes, in vain. He calls his children a waste and compares them to weeds. He dislikes them so much that he's willing to pay the player for a very horrible service. If Lemkil witnesses the Dragonborn fighting someone within Rorikstead, then he will send you a letter praising your skills and offering to pay you to do something similar to one of his daughters. That's right, Skyrim lets you get paid to beat up children. This may seem quite out of the left field for Bethesda to include, and you'd be right. This option was likely caused by an oversight by the developers. Let me explain. Every character in Skyrim has a designated relationship with each other, with the default being neutral. However, in cases where two characters have a negative relationship with each other, then they could become the target of the Dragonborn during the Radiant quest Scare My Enemy, where you're hired to beat someone up. Likely, Bethesda developers didn't realize that these variables working in tandem could lead to players getting rewarded for introducing their fists to children's faces. So, Bethesda's not the bad guy here, they just didn't know what they were doing. Being referenced throughout the Elder Scrolls games, Queen Patima is regarded as one of the most dangerous necromancers in the history of Tamriel. As the mother of Uriel Septim III, Patima launched a rebellion against her niece so that her son would take the title of Emperor. And although she was overthrown, it was not without a fight. Queen Patima would summon Daedra and use necromancy to reanimate her enemies to fight for her. and despite all these horror stories, people still thought it was a good idea to summon her. To stop her from becoming a threat akin to Alduin or Merak, you're going to have to first complete The Man Who Cried Wolf, where you must stop a group of necromancers trying to summon Patima. Then, during the quest The Wolf Queen Awakened, you find out that Patima's spirit has latched onto you. Now you must put her to rest for good in her catacombs. But be warned, this is one of the toughest battles in the game. First, you'll have to take on waves of her undead horde while she dishes out shock damage to you. Once the final wave is complete, she'll retreat to a back room where she'll continue to reanimate the Draugr you just killed and respawn several times before she finally ends up as a pile of ghostly goo. Chillrend is constantly heralded as one of the best weapons in all of Skyrim, and for good reason. Thanks to its high base damage, this frozen sword is essential for any one-handed playthrough, especially during the higher levels, when the Chillrend dishes out a cold serving of 15 base damage, along with 30 points of frost damage and a paralysis enchantment to boot. The sword is found in Mercer Frey's Manor, which can be accessed during the tail end of the Thieves' Guild questline. Past the myriad of traps and guards, you'll eventually find yourself inside Mercer's secret room, and sitting in a display case will be the Chillrend. This weapon is not only unique for its ridiculously high base damage and incredible enchantments, but it's also one of the few weapons in the game that also makes an appearance in Oblivion. And it's good to see that this glass sword wasn't nerfed when it found its way to Skyrim. If min-maxing is how you want to play the game, then being a stealth archer is the way to go. But anyone who's tried this playstyle can know how slow the bow drawing is during the early game. It feels like your character suddenly becomes a decrepit old man as soon as the bow comes out. But with the Zephyr, you'll never have to worry about drawing your bow again. This unique bow can be found in the ruins of Arkenthams, as it once belonged to a fellow adventurer named Katria, who died trying to uncover the legend of the Ethereum Forge. With the help of this spectral ghost, you now have to make your way across an assortment of Dwemer contraptions and lurking Falmer before you finally get to the fallen tree trunk where Katria fell from all those years ago. Being careful not to have the same fate as her, you can slowly make your way to the edge of the tree, where you'll find Zephyr. Katria was definitely a sweaty adventurer if she was using this bow, as it can make your already broken stealth archer build that much more overpowered. This is thanks to its draw speed, which is 30% faster than other bows, making it the fastest drawing bow in the game. Coupling this with the quickshot perk, and you have the makings of a Rambo build you never thought you could have had. After all, who needs to have a dagger as a secondary when you can pump enemies full of arrows faster than they can swing? In the northern side of Solstheim, you'll come across the Nordic ruin of White Ridge Barrow. Not only is this ruin the home of one-of-a-kind spider scrolls, it also houses a dark story of two siblings that went mad. Merilar and Servos Rendaz were a pair of dark elf mages who had a particular interest in the albino spiders native to Solstheim. After discovering that the spiders could harness magic, the two siblings came to White Ridge Barrow to develop an imbuing chamber, which allowed them to engineer spiders that would cause an elemental explosion on impact. In addition to becoming hand grenades from hell, these engineered spiders could also latch onto a victim's head and control their mind. But their discovery went to Merilar's head, and she began to suspect that her brother Servos would take all the credit. As a retaliation, Merilar locked her brother Servos in a cage where he likely starved to death. By the time we arrive, Merilar is still alive and has now become obsessed with the chanting coming from the word wall in the main tomb, believing that its source was something far more powerful than the spiders. Too bad she now has to go up against you, who's likely harnessed the power of a word wall 40 times over by now. The Thieves' Guild has a whole assortment of unique characters, all with interesting backstories. Rune is one such character, but his story is a little more interesting than the other members. If you speak with Rune, he will share his story. Rune has no recollection of his family. As a boy, he was found near an abandoned shipwreck by a fisherman on the north coast of Skyrim, without any possessions except for a stone with unknown runes marked onto it. If you do some further digging in the cistern, you'll even find a written letter to Rune by what sounds like a private detective that he had hired to discover what the rune he was found with means. Rune even claims to have been to the College of Winterhold to find out what it means, but to no avail. Some fans speculate that the carvings on the rune could be of Daedric, Dwemer, or Dragon origin, but considering that even the experts of the College of Winterhold were unable to find the source, tells us that they're entirely unique. Another mystery about this character, which has gone under lots of speculation, is his parents. Some believe Rune to be a descendant of the Grey Fox from Oblivion, but I think the most plausible theory is that Rune is just an Easter egg in reference to the video game Rune, released in 2000. Much like Skyrim, Rune takes place in a fantasy world based on Norse mythology. Even the helmet from the game's box art is almost identical to the iron helmet from Skyrim. So maybe the carvings on the stone that Rune was found with couldn't be traced back to any language because they're Viking runes, which don't exist in the world of the Elder Scrolls. Warlord Gathric is one of the most interesting bosses in the game, as the boss fight can be completely different depending on your level. Found in Ironbind Barrow, this mummified Nord has dedicated his undead life to guarding the become ethereal world wall and has an entourage of Draugr to follow suit. There are many interesting qualities about this boss. Not only is he one of the tallest humanoids in the game, making many people believe that he's an Atmoran, but Gathric can also either be a Death Lord or a Dragon Priest. And although the difficulty of this boss fight could take some people off guard, the dragon shout that you obtain from him is definitely worth the effort, as it's one of the best in the game. Although pretty much all of the dragons found in Skyrim were resurrected by Alduin, there does lie one that was not. Deep inside the Labyrinthian, you'll find a dragon which took intermittent fasting a little too far and no longer has any scales. Because of this, the skeletal dragon cannot fly, nor does it drop any dragon scales when killed. It also lacks a dragon soul, as again, it was not resurrected by Alduin, but rather an ancient necromancer. Not only does this mean you're coming out of this battle with nothing but a pile of dragon bones, but it can also make this boss the only dragon which you can fight before completing Dragon Rising. And although this dragon looks super badass, it's unfortunate that it's the easiest dragon to kill in the game. Despite the Thalmor making for some of the best target practice in the game, some maniacs at Bethesda thought that some players may want to join the Aldmeri Dominion. I'm not saying those people don't exist, but why you would want to cater to such psychos is beyond me. Nevertheless, these Thalmor bootlickers had their way. Although you cannot exactly join the Thalmor, you can certainly become an ally to them. Inside Markath's Understone Keep, you'll find a Thalmor agent known as Ondolmar. Like all other Justicars, his goal is to root out all Talos worship inside Markath's walls, and if you've lost all self-respect, then you can give Ondolmar a helping hand with fishing out a suspected Talos worshipper within the city. After retrieving the amulet and returning it back to Ondolmar, he'll quickly gossip to all his friends and make you an ally of the Thalmor the following day. I guess news spreads quickly within the Thalmor. Not only does this have Thalmor agents give you warm regards whenever you come across them on your travels, but you're now free to take whatever valuables you desire from their headquarters, and even sleep in their beds. On the surface, Forelhost seems like any other Nordic ruin. However, when you look deeper at the lore behind the dungeon, things get a lot darker. When Nords arrived in Skyrim from Atmora, they brought their worship of dragons with them. Known as the Dragon Cult, it's this religion that can take credit for almost all the tombs scattered across Skyrim. But Forelhost is important in that it was the last known holdout of these ancient people. But during a siege by Skyrim's High King, the Dragon Cult finally accepted their eradication and decided to go out on their terms. Believing that they would come back to life once the dragons returned, the cultists poisoned their water source and forced everyone to drink it, leading to a self-inflicted genocide. All of the last remaining men, women and children of the Dragon Cult died by their own hands during their final ritual. You can even find mummified Norns that look far too small to be adults. Their prophecy of returning to life did eventually come true, but not in the way they had hoped for. Now the halls of Forelhost are haunted by ghosts and undead, who now have a permanent tie to the monastery. The Dwemer were one of, if not the most advanced race in the Elder Scrolls universe. From mechanical automations to giant airships, the Dwemer have made inventions that even as of Skyrim, no civilization has been able to replicate. But their technological prowess, along with their entire race, all mysteriously disappeared during the Battle of Red Mountain, a fierce battle where the Dunmer were trying to stop the Dwemer from using the Heart of Lorkhan. Yes, the same Lorkhan that created Nirn. Lorkhan's heart was being used by a specific Dwemer magecrafter known as Kagranak, who was trying to use the heart to make a new god that would act in the Dwemer's interest. It would be one final FU to the gods and other races, who thought the Dwemer's aesthetic society was heresy. But once the Dhamma learned about Kagranak's plans, a war broke out between the two races, culminating in one final battle between the Dwemer and the Dhamma at Red Mountain. And while the Dark Elves were trying to stop Kagranak from accomplishing his admittedly insane far-out goal, all of the Dwemer suddenly disappeared, likely after Kagranak tampered with the heart of Lorcan. And ever since that day, the question of where the Dwemer went has been shrouded in mystery, both within the game's lore and fans alike. But if we want answers, we're going to have to take a stroll down memory lane and go all the way back to Morrowind to speak with Yagran Bagan. Yagran Bagan is self-proclaimed to be the last remaining Dwemer in Tamriel and offers his own theory as to how the Dwemer disappeared. Yagran believes that Kagranak fulfilled his plan to grant his race eternal life, but with unforeseen consequences, such as your entire race being transported to a different realm. This would mean that the dwarves are not extinct at all, but rather in a different plane of reality to that of the Mundus. In fact, Yagran believes that he did not go with the other Dwemer due to him being in a different plane of reality during their disappearance. And I, for one, believe that this is very plausible. However, there is also some additional insight that has been provided by ex-Bethesda writer Michael Kirkland, who has a fan theory of his own. Kirkland also believes that Kagranak did fulfill his plan to wield the power of the Heart of Lorcan, but instead of being sent to a different reality, they were sent to a different time. Time travel isn't exactly a new idea in the Elder Scrolls universe, so calling this theory far-fetched is a little far-fetched. And based on all the evidence we have so far, plus on top of Kirkland being responsible for writing some of the Elder Scrolls universe's lore, this theory most likely is the truth of what happened to the Dwemer. The Ebony Warrior is probably the most elusive character in Skyrim. This Dark Knight appears only after you reach level 80, appearing as a man clad in ebony armor and challenging you to a duel to the death. Upon meeting him at the agreed-upon location, the Ebony Warrior will have no words left for you and will simply stand there, waiting for you to land the first blow. How nice of him. It's important to realize that level 80 was the maximum level in the vanilla game before it was later changed, so the Ebony Warrior was likely meant to be the final challenge for the player to overcome. It's also likely that most players will complete most of Skyrim's content by the time they reach level 60, so reaching level 80 was reserved for those players who were truly dedicated to becoming the best. Interestingly enough, the Ebony Warrior faces a similar dilemma. He claims that there are no longer any quests to be undertaken, villains to be slain, or challenges to face except for you. The Ebony Warrior believes he is ready to journey to Sovngarde and considers the Dragonborn the only person capable of killing him in combat to make that happen, which makes this whole encounter even more bizarre, considering the Ebony Warrior is a Redguard and Sovngarde is exclusive to Nords, right? Redguards have a similar afterlife to the Nords called the Far Shores, so wanting to go to another race's afterlife is just outright strange. Many fans believe that the Ebony Warrior is not a regular mortal, but rather an avatar of Hunding, a god worshipped by the Redguard people. This god was materialized into a mortal form whenever the Redguard people needed a hero to make way for their people. Most come to this conclusion because he is similar in strength to the Dragonborn and looks very similar to Raymond Ebonarmed, another avatar of Hunding. But the truth is a little more anticlimactic. Despite what most people think, you don't actually have to be a Nord to feast in the halls of Sovngarde, as long as you follow the Nordic pantheon of gods such as Shor and Ysmir and live with the heart of a Nord, then getting into Sovngarde is not so difficult. So, based on all the evidence, the Ebony Warrior is actually Hunding, the Redguard god. Although the College of Winterhold teaches all sorts of magic, something they are strictly against is the dark arts of necromancy and other unsavory magical disciplines. But this being the same college that nearly ended the world and probably had something to do with Winterhold's destruction, it's no surprise that some of the college students were nonetheless interested in such teachings. And to keep things on the hush-hush, these professors and students would use the Midden, a large series of stone corridors and chambers underneath the college, where all sorts of heinous rituals were performed. From animal heads on human bodies to torture chambers and mass graves, the Midden has all the amenities that a depraved mage could ask for. If that still sounds too vanilla, then there's also the Atronach Forge, which is used to bring those from Oblivion to the mortal realm, which is always a good sign to get out of a place immediately. AAA Delete When Done Test Jeremy. As the name suggests, it sounds like Jeremy has some answering to do, as this cell was likely meant to be long deleted by the time the game was shipped, but its inclusion was forgotten and remains in the final product to this day. This cell contains two NPCs, Test Jeremy Small and Test Jeremy Big. Although both of these NPCs are naked and do nothing but smelt ores in this tiny room all day, they do have an interesting move up their sleeve once they've finished with their smelting animation. One of them becomes bigger, and the other becomes smaller. And that's pretty much all this has to offer. This room was likely made to test being able to change the sizes of models in real time, which may have been a concept for a spell or staff sometime early into development. But rumor has it that these two guys are the ones responsible for powering the game's engine, which perfectly explains why Skyrim is such a buggy mess all the time. If you didn't think Skyrim could be a horror game, you definitely will after you hear the story of Lord Tusk. On a remote island east of Solstheim, you'll find a journal that tells anyone who dared set foot on this island to turn back the way they came. But since we're the Dragonborn and gifted with the power of quick saving, we venture on. Further into the island, you'll find a shipwreck with hawkers that are unlike any other. Where most hawkers are territorial creatures who only attack when provoked, these ones are bloodthirsty savages that attack on sight. But going even deeper will reveal the apex predator of the island, Lord Tusk. This hawker has double the health, damage, and size of any other of its kind. It's a fight that can get pretty ugly, especially if you're a low level. But luckily there's a unique mace nearby that does extra damage against hawkers. Killing Lord Tusk will show that he has 4 human skulls in his stomach, which indicates that these hawkers developed a taste for humans at some point. It goes without saying that I love being a stealth archer as much as the next person, but it's not exactly a challenging playstyle. I don't care who you manage to kill, aiming at your opponents without them ever seeing you is hardly a display of your skills. If you really want to put your archery to the test, then you'll have to test your might with Angie. Found at a camp in the Falkreath Mountains, Angie is a little more unique than most skill trainers. Instead of giving you a skill level in exchange for a couple of hundred septims, Angie is willing to offer a full-fledged lesson in Archery 101 at a shooting range. Best of all, Angie doesn't want any money. All she asks for is a willingness to learn and a passion for the art of archery. Like any short course, the lesson amounts to a few minutes of lecturing until you can finally stretch your muscles at a shooting range with a challenge. There are 3 challenges in total, and passing each one earns a point in archery. And if you manage to complete her final challenge, she'll even throw her bow into the prize pool as a sign of respect. The Dark Brotherhood is the Elder Scrolls mecca of ne'er-do-wells and depravity, so it comes to the surprise of no one that Skyrim lets you outfit your sanctuary with a torture chamber, complete with several captives. Though the captives are great target practice, lab rats, and vampiric livestock, they have a much more useful trait up their sleeve. Apparently, the Dark Brotherhood kidnapped Skyrim's biggest introverts, because while beating them silly does nothing, just a few minutes of small talk will make them give in and reveal all their secrets. In this case, that would be a hidden stash they tucked away from the eyes of even the most keen-eyed adventurers. Going to the location marked on your map will reveal their treasure to be a hefty sum of gold, ranging from 1 to 2,000 septims to be exact. Not only does this easily pay back the cost of buying the chamber in the first place, but you should even have some spare change on the side as well. Southwest of Windhelm, you'll find Mara's Eye Pond, an unassuming clearing that most players glance past during their travels, but one that also holds a dark secret. Going to the little island at the center of the pond will reveal a trapdoor that leads to a secret hideout used by vampires to dump and store their victims after they've sucked them dry. This realization came to a smuggler who was doing deliveries for these vampires before he got a little too curious and opened up one of the boxes he was delivering, only to find that it was filled to the brim with human bodies. And so, they just threw him in the smuggler with everyone else. At least you can head over there and put a stop to their madness. Ever visited Windsor Hold and wondered just what the hell happened there that led to all but a few shacks and a dilapidated college remaining? Well, that would be caused by the Great Collapse. The Great Collapse was a collection of geological storms that occurred throughout the northern parts of Skyrim, which caused massive tsunami-like waves to occur in the Sea of Ghosts, the northmost sea bordering Skyrim, leading to the majority of Windsor Hold collapsing into the sea below. 2 questions came about from this event that remains unsolved. What could have caused something so devastating to occur, and how did the College of Winterhold come out of this disaster mostly unharmed? Well, there are varying reports depending on who you ask. Most of the Nords in Winterhold were already suspicious of magic, so it's no surprise that they were quick to blame the College of Winterhold for not protecting the town, as they did with their college, and others think that they caused the Great Collapse altogether. But many others believe that an event known as the Red Year is what caused it all. In case you haven't brushed up on your Elder Scrolls knowledge, the Red Year was an event that occurred almost 200 years before the events of Skyrim, which many saw as the year that the Nerevarene's prophecy from Morrowind was fulfilled. After the tribunal god Vivec mysteriously disappeared, a floating piece of the moon known as Bardau crashed into Vivec City, leading to a series of natural disasters across Vvardenfell, most notably the eruption of the Red Mountain volcano. And this is what the people of the college believe led to the Great Collapse. But there's also a third theory, that you caused it. That's right, according to this theory, the Dragonborn caused the Great Collapse. After they interacted with the Eye of Magnus and the Sigic Order monk that you see throughout the College of Winterhold's questline, tells you that you have set in motion a chain of events that cannot be stopped, which some fans speculate is referring to the Great Collapse. After all, it wouldn't be the first time the Elder Scrolls universe dabbled in time travel. I'm sure we've all been there. One day, we're out exploring the wilds of Skyrim, minding our own business, when suddenly, a mudcrab jumps out of nowhere and begins to attack us. So we kill it, but not without realizing that we captured its puny soul into a grand soul gem, having it go to waste in the process. Or so you thought. Bethesda probably knew that players were going to run into an issue like this, so they added a sneaky way to remove souls from soul gems. Simply drop the soul gem onto the ground and pick it up again. Once you pick it up, you'll find that the soul will be removed from the gem and it will be empty. Fast traveling is one of the core elements of what makes Skyrim fun. While there is a case to be made that fast travel can take away from the experience, I found that walking through the same roads for hundreds of hours is about as fun as it is in real life. Meanwhile, fast traveling can get you from point A to point B in no time, leaving all that boring walking to reality. This is why it's all the more infuriating to be locked off from this mechanic while over-encumbered. As if walking like a snail wasn't bad enough, Bethesda kicks you while you're down and makes you unable to fast travel as well. But this may not have to be the case. Leaving all the loot behind, or, God forbid, walking all the way back to a town, you can instead turn to your horse, a mechanic that seems like a no-brainer has ironically been absent from the minds of many Skyrim players, myself included. Simply jump on a horse, open the map, and fast travel wherever you'd like. Because of this mechanic, it's a good idea to unlock Arvak as soon as possible. That way, you can have this mechanic literally right at your fingertips and never have to worry about carrying too much again. Ivarstead seems like an ordinary village. However, it has a dark side. That's because this mountainside town is home to a murder mystery. Up until a year before the game, Nafri lived in his home with his sister Raida. But at some point, she mysteriously disappears and remains missing when you find her brother. Speaking to him will begin a miscellaneous quest to locate his long-lost sister, whose remains are found underneath the village's bridge, with a satchel next to her. But who killed her? Speaking to Wilhelm the innkeeper will point you in the direction of Gehrman's Hall, but it's another dead end from there, as her body is nowhere near that dungeon. Coupling this with the fact that all her valuables were untouched leads many people to believe one of two theories. The first is that she took her own life after being unable to cope with the death of her parents, and the second is that she was murdered. Things get particularly suspicious when one of your first contacts with the Dark Brotherhood is to kill Nafri, leading many to speculate that someone has a grudge against the family. However, the most plausible theory is the killer being Wendelius, since he arrived at Ivarstead at the same time as Raider's death. And that just leaves one question: who killed Nafri? Well, you did, but who put out the contract? Considering that the only person that seems at all aware of Nafri's existence is Wilhelm, it's most likely that he put out the contract as a mercy kill. After all, the guy lost his entire family and was living out his days in ruin. A player using an unarmed build is as rare as a healthy and supportive family in Skyrim. Yet Bethesda accounted for both possibilities nonetheless. The Glove of the Pugilist is one of those weapons that pretty much everyone finds but never ends up using. This set of enchanted gloves is found in the Ratway, specifically on the body of Giant the Fist, and they pack a pretty hefty punch, no pun intended. Although the gloves themselves leave a lot to be desired, the Fortify Unarmed Damage enchantment is what really makes this find so special. Putting this enchantment on a set of heavy gauntlets in tandem with the Fists of Steel perks turns your hands into registered lethal weapons. This might sound a little underwhelming at first, but when you factor in the number of times you can progress quests through a brawl, you realize how vital a set of gloves with this enchantment is for any playthrough. You also can't deny that there isn't any better way to assert your dominance over Skyrim's most dangerous foes than beating them to a pulp with your bare fists. It's certainly a build that'll put hair on your chest, that's for sure.
Subscribe to Fall Damage, you milk drinker.